Hello. I'm seeing quite a few people in the chat already. Welcome to our webinar. It's exciting to be here. I will probably give us another 30 seconds or so to just let folks jump in, and then we'll kick this off. Awesome. Well, let's do it. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our Tech Talk with Finn. My name is Vasundhara. I'm on the marketing team here at Retool, and I'm fortunate to be joined by Cornelius and Leander from the Finn team. So quick introduction to those of you who aren't yet familiar with Finn. Finn is a company that launched 4 years ago to make access to mobility easier. In that short time frame, they've scaled fast. Today, they operate internationally in 10 states along the East Coast and in Germany, where the headquarters is. They have over 20,000 cars in fleet and 100 million in ARR, all in 3.5 years since launch, and with a team of fewer than 70 software engineers. So how do they do it? We've learned that the velocity with which Finn's team of data engineers like Cornelius and software engineers like Leander ship custom internal tools is really the backbone of their company's operational rigor and has ultimately become a massive business advantage. On that note, let's chat internal tools, your tech stack, and more. I'll start us off with some quick questions. We'll jump immediately into a demo of the Retool apps that their team has built, and then finally move into audience Q&A. So as you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section in the bottom navigation bar. Our engineer, Julie, on the call will respond via the chat, and we'll take the questions with the most upvotes live at the end of the webinar. So with that, I'll kick us off. Let's start by learning a little bit more about how both of you came to Finn and what your backgrounds are. Cornelius, let's start with you, and we'll move on to Leander.
Sure. Hi, I'm Cornelius. I'm very excited to be here. Thanks for having us. Personally, I have sort of a data science and business background, so I have a fair bit of experience with Python and R and sort of data science scripting languages. I came to Finn as an intern doing process automations, initially a lot with like low-code tools, and eventually I sort of upskilled my way to AWS, Lambda functions, JavaScript, and then eventually also a lot of retools. I was very lucky. I was one of the first sort of tech-focused full-time employees in the US. So I spent a lot of time in the beginning setting up databases and designing the data model, both transactionally and analytically, setting up the initial sort of services and partner integrations, and building the first suite of internal tools for our US operations, which is how I came to know Retool and came to really enjoy it as a product. Over to you, Leander.
Cool, thanks, Cornelius. Also, thanks for having us. My name's Leander. I was always interested in computers and electronics. Started studying computer science, worked some time in the automotive industry on advanced driver assist systems, so a lot of machine learning stuff. Then I started at Finn in late 2021, just in time for takeoff. And then I started at Customer Product. And we are a very diverse team of PMs, designers, app and web and backend developers. And we are handling many products as, for example, the customer portal, the mobile app, and 5 APIs that are needed to support all these different clients. Additionally, we are also the owner of the subscriptions API, which is pretty much the core of our subscription platform, which is managing our subscriptions and our growth. On top of all of that, we are also frequently building powerful Retool apps that help our customer care agents, customer success agents, and provide best experience to our customers.
And it's really interesting that while you sort of have varying levels of technical expertise in your backgrounds, at Finn, you've actually both built and shipped relatively complex production-ready apps. But not to get ahead of ourselves, for folks in the audience to really understand what Finn does, Cornelius, can you briefly tell us sort of what the core product is and what makes the business so operationally complex?
Sure. I think everyone should be seeing my screen now. So very briefly, Finn is trying to build a true e-commerce experience for cars. I think if you've ever gotten a car in the last 5 to 10 years at a dealership, you kind of know that the current model of ownership of cars is a little bit broken and the processes are leave a lot to be desired. So Finn is trying to tackle that with a 5-minute checkout experience, a subscription price that includes everything from insurance, maintenance, roadside assistance, registration. And you can check out with a vehicle for a certain price and you'll get it delivered to your doorstep within a couple of days usually. Now that is a very seamless customer experience on the front end, but on the back end, there's obviously a lot of complexity that Finn as a business needs to manage. And I will sort of quickly go through the life cycle of how Finn works as a business, because it helps tie the viewer's understanding to why we need a lot of internal tools and what the value is that they provide for us. So usually our life cycle starts with cars being in productions at car makers. We're working with over 20 brands at the moment, and we have like above 700 million in financing to purchase these vehicles. And then we obviously have to move them. We move them and in-fleet them through what we call compounds, which are basically gigantic parking lots with a workshop attached where you can mount the license plate, you wash them, you get the vehicle ready. We have over 25 of those, handling 20,000 cars, both in the inflow and the outflow of vehicles, across 10 states in the US and 2 countries with Germany. And then we have to obviously deliver the car to the customer. And we're working with a number of delivery providers and over 500 drivers to manage this, to have at the moment over 15,000 subscriptions active. And then after the subscription runs out, we take back the car and we either put it into another subscription or we offload it, so we sell it off. And as Vasundhara has mentioned, we've done this in like under 3 years of like around 3 years of operations. We've scaled up to above 100 million in ARR, with less or around 300 full-time employees. So there's a lot of transactions happening per full-time employee, and we're doing this with a really high customer satisfaction score. And all of this, just to give you a little bit of a sense of scale, video you're seeing now, that's from one of our compounds that I just mentioned. And every single one of those cars is a Finn car. It should be like around 700 to 800 cars. And every single one of them needs to be, financed, insured, license plate mounted, washed, and be ready on time for customers. So that's a lot of molecules and atoms that we have to move, and we use a lot of software and bits to actually achieve that. And really, what you can think of Finn doing is being a sort of center of excellence in the middle, because we obviously can't do all of that in-house. That would be massively expensive and asset heavy. So we partner up with a lot of partners, like doing registration, insurance, financing. And what Finn really is sort of the technology-driven partner integration platform that will connect all the dots in the middle and build seamless processes to handle that high level of transaction volume, with positive unit economics, and make sure that all of this comes out to a very smooth customer experience.
And sort of now that we have this context on Finn's core business as this center of excellence, combining a bunch of different services across a bunch of different APIs, I'd actually love to dive into how your team thinks about internal tools. And so, Leander, can you maybe share your perspective on how you have thought about building internal tools at Finn? Specifically, what is something that you wish every developer knew?
Of course. Yeah, I guess one of the biggest topics on internal tools in general is maintenance. So changing requirements, new partners, or data sources are like a big part of what we are daily doing. As Cornelius already mentioned, many connections, many partners, many compounds, everyone does things differently. So actually, our Retool apps are experiencing sometimes changes every week or every few days. So if we would jump into building such dashboards with React, for example, they would be very tailored to their first intended use case. And pretty much every team would build their own dashboards, but they would completely vary in many things like packages, coding styles, and also what they look like. This makes things very complex, especially when implementing new stuff. So on the other side, when building dashboards with Retool, all components pretty much behave the same. So it's the big goal of front-end engineering, actually, to have everything behave the same, look the same. So you throw in an array of objects into a table component, and a whole table gets rendered, and it's always the same. And that's one of the beauties of working with Retool, and like pretty much you can offload all that thoughts on, yeah, have the same style, have the same structure in your data, in your code, all offloaded. Don't spend time on that. Also, what Retool offers is the custom component. So pretty much it's completely free what you want to do. And also, if you, for example, have like 2 teams and you want to switch just the team and like work on another dashboard, it's incredibly easy to like have, as I said, everything look and behave the same. So you jump into a completely unknown dashboard. You never worked on it before, but it feels like you build it yourself, because the logic is always the same. It just has a little bit of different business logic. So following these best practices contributes to like a very smooth teamwork. It prevents these unnecessary discussions on coding style and personal preferences. So Retool is like a great senior software engineer. It's like flexible, but also opinionated.
That's clever. I think the concept behind Retool is basically what you're getting at, right? That it's this much faster way than building from scratch or building in React, for example, and all the things you have to manage, like components or connecting to databases, APIs, state authentication, sort of all of that is available out of the box. But not to get too much into the theory here and really jump into the visuals, I'd actually love for the 2 of you to demo the Retool apps that play a part in making all of this happen. So Cornelius, let's kick off with you. Could you share an example of one of the apps that you've built at Finn that support maybe like the operations, your in-fleet cars? And it would be great if you could touch upon specifically the business problems that it solves and how it's implemented.
Sure. So the app that I'm demoing today is what we call the car details one. And the sort of targeted user for this is a role we have internally called a fleet process managers. Those are sort of the tactical day-to-day on-the-ground operations managers who make sure that cars are progressing through their processes and that they're ready on time for customers, and that all the things that need to be done are actually done on time. So as a fleet process manager, I would need to constantly check into, where is this car currently located? What are the properties, the metadata, some identifiers of it? When did it arrive? When is it going to be ready? Is the license plate mounted? Where is it registered? All of these sort of tactical, in the moment decisions that I need to pull very, very quickly. So what this app does is exactly that. So it shows you the detailed operational state for a single car, where it is in the current timeline, and then it has multiple tabs to allow a fleet process manager to interact with the car object and either follow up on partners not doing their job or doing their job, and quickly have an overview of what's happening to the vehicle. So we have the first tab, which just gives you a bunch of information, and you can also add notes to a specific car. Let's say if you're on the call with a compound provider and they give you a note that might be relevant for later. You can also see the associated subscriptions, so the linkage between the two. You can manage the vehicle transfer, so having scheduled the delivery, or like, is it ready? Is it going to be ready on time? The delivery providers. And all of these will jump into associated Retool applications that will show details for those particular objects. And then lastly, this compound processes tab is where they'll also do a lot of their work. And this basically just shows them, for a given vehicle, what are the sort of set of processes they've undergone and what has happened. So this example vehicle that we have here arrived on July 1st, and you can see the history of ETAs that led up to this. And he or she could quickly see, okay, the license plate has been mounted, the cleaning and pre-delivery detailing of the car is done, and when it was done, stickers are not yet done. So we need to maybe follow up on that. And the cool thing is they can also, the following up on that part doesn't have to be through calling or emails, but this application actually allows you to interact with our partners API through the Retool UI. So let's say we're moving cars from one compound to the other, and we need to send an like ETA date, like an estimated arrival time. They can just do that from here. It will open up a modal. They can say, hey, this car will arrive here, and then send the ETA. And in the background, it will call the partners API, let them know that this car with this identifier, all the metadata that's needed, is going to arrive on that date. It will update our database, and it will update the Retool app. And there's a bunch of other functionalities that might be a bit too domain focused here, but they can sort of add new things to be done on the car, and all of these will interact with the partner's API in a predefined protocol. So the impact of this app is really, it reduces the number of spreadsheets flowing around, which is always what happens in operations. And it reduces the number of emails that need to be sent, because this is a much more efficient way to retrieve information, to visualize information to the business users, and to structure communication with partners. And because Finn has so many partners, this is really a crucial business advantage that allows us to transact a high volume of cars with very few or comparably few employees. And I mean, the cool thing about this as well is it's just so fast to implement. I would say that probably with Retool, we're about 10 times faster in shipping individual applications. This last tab, for instance, I think I built this one in like 2 days or something, and then it was shipped. And with the new Git versioning feature, different people or different engineers or software engineers can work on different functionalities of a single app and then ship them and release them separately or jointly, which is really powerful, because it allows very, very fast iteration cycles, which is what we need.
I'm seeing some responses in the chat that this is a beautifully designed app. Just to be clear, Cornelius is not a designer. He's in fact a data scientist, a data engineer. So this is sort of his first design rodeo, if you will. But Cornelius, to bring it back to this app, can you tell us a little bit about sort of how many in-fleet process managers are using this app daily?
So we have obviously some in Germany, and we have some in the US. Because we only recently launched in the US, we have fewer here. So I would say we probably have around 2 to 3 people using this application here in the US. And in Germany, we probably have around 10 to 15 people that are of a similar kind of role of managing the fleet processes. So that's a lot of cars being managed by very few people.
That's pretty amazing that such a few sort of number of employees are able to manage the kind of scale that you guys are already operating at. And I think the way that Retool is built, right, and the goal for the product really is to be this force multiplier for developers. And some of this we've discussed with Leander, like the speed of building, for example. Building in Retool is just a fundamentally faster way than building from scratch. And we can, take care of some of the mundane aspects of development. Like you probably don't need to reinvent the wheel every time you need a form component, for example, or figure out permissioning. But a less sort of discussed advantage to building in Retool, which I think, Cornelius, you're really getting at, is this value of building something that's truly custom for your business users and really focusing on that last 20% of that internal app. And what happens when you meet people exactly where they're at and cater to the ergonomic sensibilities of your specific sort of operational business needs. All of this, I think, actually, Leander's app that he's going to demo next captures really well. So Leander, can you show us the KYC app at Finn, please? And also some of the tech behind it.
Yes, I would love to. Cool. So you should see it now. Welcome to the customer care verification dashboard. So big question mark, why do we even do manual verifications in the first place? So the answer to that is easy. If you take a look at Bird or Lime, like these mobility scooter apps, you also have to upload your driver license. But the difference between them and us is pretty much that our cars can cost up to $160,000, which I guess it's some amount of money where we do want to know who our customers are and if they have, for example, a driver license that is valid for the term. So who uses this dashboard is pretty much our customer care agents. What they do is pretty much for every new customer, they spin up this dashboard or they get a link for it. And they will check all our different partners, our internal data, and compare it to each other and check if the data matches up. A very nice example is especially this one here for my license. So I was doing the checkout with my first and last name, but actually I have a second name. So Retool or dashboard is indicating that there's something not matching up. In this case, I would say that's fine. It's just a second name. So we can actually start tagging this checkbox here. So we have like a lot of components. So actually this dashboard goes quite far down, but I'm not showing that because that would be actually a lot. So just to give you like a few numbers. So we have around 170 components in this dashboard. One component or a component can be like the image holder here, or a button, or a checkbox. So we are pulling data from up to 5 data sources internally and externally for one customer, for one session. We're pulling that all together, aggregating, concatenating, comparing, setting colors, just to give like our customer care agents a very quick overview on the new customer. So for example, not every component here is made by Retool. So one of them, for example, is done by us. Around a year ago, we were approached by customer care agents, and they were, hey, some customers upload photos of driver licenses with like bad camera quality, low light, just bad visibility. We would love to have like a zoom, and we would love to pan around on the image. So here it is. That's a custom component just built by us in the Retool environment. And you can actually, you can zoom in, you can see this beautiful German license, and you can get a better and clearer view of a front side or back side, and zoom in and get a better visibility. So we have like a huge impact here. So as I already said, we have 5 data sources. You can imagine if you would start to like jump into every data source, open a database, open an external partner, load the website, paste the contact ID, paste the name, it would take forever. Actually, it would take up to 10 to 15 minutes per customer to get like all the data together, and you have to write it down somewhere, or you have to memorize it and compare it on your own. Actually, with this dashboard, it's possible to do the whole verification process of one customer in or only 1 minute. Just to give you an example, on our scale, what that is, that pretty much daily saves up to 50 hours of work. And I guess 50 hours for a 20-hour day is quite a lot of work for us. So let's jump a little bit deeper in it. I would like to show you first the our custom component, because it's stupidly easy and great to make. So Retool is allowing you to pretty much build your own custom components. You can see it here. Our development speed is even so fast that the custom component, it's called custom component 1. But what it actually does, it is an iframe. And this iframe is allowing you, or is allowing us to have like a bunch of HTML code with a script tag. And what we are pretty much only doing is we are downloading React in the script tag, we are downloading the React DOM, and we are downloading a package that is called React Pan Zoom. So pretty much only 3 packages, so 3 lines of code. Then we put that all together, attach it to the Retool component, which is shown, and boom, we have a custom component which we can actually use company-wide. And the only thing you need to input is pretty much only your image source. I can show you it here in code again, just a little bit smaller. So it's 20 lines of code. So this whole thing was pretty much built in an hour and a half, and you have your custom component. That is super powerful. So let's jump back into the behind the scenes work of the identity and driving license verification dashboard, because this thing is complex. As I already said, we have around 170 components, and we are comparing a lot of data. You can actually see we have external assessment in Germany, we have external assessment in the US, and we are hiding them or showing them dependent on who is actually using the dashboard. So we're pretty much combining that all into one. To give you also some numbers, just to load the data for one customer, we have 47 queries. So I guess 47 queries is quite a lot of data and quite a lot of connections we are managing here. So yeah, this is a complex thing, but it was done fast, and it's also quite manageable, as you can see here. So we have like folders for util queries, DL and IDs, contact queries, all very easy to handle, actually.
Did you say 170 components? Leander?
Exactly. Yeah.
That's incredible. And
Yes.
what percent of these would you say are custom components?
I would guess around 25%.
Makes sense. You talked a little bit sort of about the before state of it would take, X amount of time across a bunch of different tabs and data sources. And now it's this like central central place where the support agents can do all the tasks that they need for KYC. How many customer support agents are using this app, and how many times in a day would you say that they're using this app?
Great question. So actually, at our current status with our growth, it is actually possible for only one customer care agent to do pretty much all verifications in one day. So I would say this whole dashboard is used around 200 or 150 to 200 times a day.
Wow.
And yeah, as I said, 50 hours of work for a whole day in the old way, that's quite some time.
And this is sort of custom KYC Fin edition. But the really incredible thing about it is that Fin's Retool setup, as powerful as these apps individually are, they're actually part of a pretty big ecosystem of sort of interconnected apps built on top of each other. And Cornelius, can you show us this directory of apps?
Sure. Maybe before we jump into the directory in detail, just some background of how Fin works at a company. As a company, I would say that Fin generally has a lot of autonomy in like bottom-up product processes, because we have such a dispersed company. Every one of the individual departments has a lot of like very custom product needs. So we're quite like we give people a lot of autonomy to build and model use cases from the bottom up, whichever come up. And we actually have like a lot of people building retools that you wouldn't expect. For instance, we have some retools were started out by customer support reps who just found themselves repeating the same task over and over again. And some of them knew how to use Postman. And then eventually they figured, hey, we can build a retool for this. Now, and every single person at Fin has access to the whole like automation suite of like low-code tools, but then also has access to Retool to build their own use cases. And they might get refined by product managers or engineers later down the road. But we really have this sort of company-wide mantra of do it, and then automate it as soon as possible and build interfaces and try to figure out smart solutions. And this is great because it leads to a lot of product velocity. But what it also leads to a little bit is a little bit of a dispersion where people who need to use retools will have like 20 different bookmarks in their browser to jump between links to retool applications. So a natural first step for us to push for more platformization and standardization was to build such a directory of apps. So you can see here, this is our global dashboards overview, which will give you sort of a navigation style that is similar to using a website. You can filter down for the applications based on the different countries. Some of them are global, some of them are exclusive for Germany, and others are exclusive for the US. And within those, you can filter down the applications sorted by different departments. So that was a first step that just allows you to scroll through and jump into individual applications as you need. And then if you are in one of those detailed applications, another push we made to have it feel more like a platform is the implementation of this navigation bar on the top here. So it allows, let's say, a customer support rep to easily switch between the different applications that they might need to use on a daily basis. And if they hit this Fin logo, they go back to the global dashboard. So that immediately allows them to like have more of a seamless, connected experience. Like traversing through the ecosystem of retools that we have built. The next thing we have found was that sometimes, because we have so many like retool applications being built, probably around 100 plus at the moment, is that sometimes it's a bit hard to know whom to reach out for if you find a bug or you want a new feature. And one thing that we're starting to do here is we have this feature request modal on the top here. So let's say, again, I'm the fleet process manager. I need some other piece of data displayed in this view. I could hit this button. It will open up the modal, and let's say, please display registration submitted date, or something that I might need, right? And I can say, this is a very high priority item for me. It would be an improvement, and I can give some more descriptions. I can hit submit, and it will create a Slack message in the background. It will create a ticket, and then we, as the product and engineering teams, will try to figure out who to assign it to and who, like, what priority to give it within the upcoming sprints. So that makes for a very frictionless and continuous feedback loop of improving this sort of network of retools that we have. And then the last thing that we've really started to use is, in order to connect the individual applications, we make heavy use of these hash parameters on the top here. So you can see, like, this application is filtered down for a specific Fin car ID, which is this test car that we're showing here. But at a certain point in time, a car is also associated with a subscription. And we have a similar view, like a detailed view for subscriptions. And if I go on this tab of subscription views, I could click this button and I could jump into the associated subscription detail application, which looks like this. And it would, for instance, allow me to add a new driver, like an additional driver to an existing subscription, or just generally see sort of the equivalent of a car details, but for a subscription. And these connectors are basically everywhere. We have them on the vehicle transfer, so managing deliveries. There's a detailed delivery dashboard that will show you a map of where things are going, how much they're costing. So all of these things combined, just to give you a little bit of an overview, these are sort of the way we think about, like, building internal tools at Fin. So we have the front end and the back end. Front end wise, we have like huge autonomy and over 100 individual retool use cases. And in the back end, they interact with some of our core services, like the car service or the subscription service that Leander is working on. We also still use a fair amount of low-code tools, so like things like HubSpot or Make and Integromat. And we're also exploring how to incorporate the Retool Workflows product that was recently launched, and do more of the automations that way. And then on the front end side, we also have elements that, like, help us to platformize and standardize our building, which is, as I mentioned, this global dashboard, the navigation bar, the standard modules, which we haven't touched upon yet, but I'll get to in a second, and the sort of linkage between retools. And what we do with standard modules are, they're like something like Leander's like pan zoom thing is a standard module that you can import in every retool. But what we also do, for instance, is we have a container that will display you the car details, so the identifier and a bunch of information about it, and it will interact with the car service API in a specific way, and it will be maintained in a central place. So if the API logic changes or the interface changes, it will be maintained in one way, and then you can slap it into every application that you need it to. So B2B might be interested in that, or user acquisition or operations, and you can make sure that you have an element of, like, standardization and continuity throughout the ecosystem. And it means that not everyone has to learn every single API that we have internally. And then the last thing that we've also recently, sure, if you want to jump in with a question.
I have a super quick question. So Cornelius, so we understand, because I'm seeing some stuff in the chat about this, you have each team that is empowered to build and retool, and each team has its own sort of set of apps and set of problems that it's solving using, retool functionality. But at the same time, across these teams and across these use cases, you have basically modules, like snippets of code or logic or queries, etc., that are being reused to sort of avoid rewriting the same logic over and over again by different engineers on the team. Does that sort of capture what you were trying to say?
Yeah, and to be completely honest, we're obviously not perfect in this, right? I mean, there's still a lot of probably, like things where we can improve on and do this more and focus on this more. But we're trying to move into a direction where we have we avoid duplicating work as much as possible.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And how often would you say, if the basic sort of logic of an app is already built out in modules, or maybe someone else has already built that in a retool app, are sort of folks taking that app and then sort of extending it to another simple use case or something like that? I'm trying to sort of understand how extensible each one of these apps are.
That's a good question, and I probably don't have the perfect overview because the Fin as a company is so broad. So I'm not that attuned to what B2B is doing, for instance, in Germany. But I would say at least for the things that interact with the core things like the subscriptions API and the car API. I mean, we're a car subscription platform, so at some level of abstraction, it always boils down to this. I would say that these are being used quite frequently in a lot of places. And then there are others that are just sort of further out in the spectrum that don't need to have such a general applicability across the stack.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think you were going to show us some app analytics, so I'll let you continue.
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is going to be a pretty quick point because we only recently started to do that. But a really cool thing is with Retool that you can do is you can connect Google Analytics to it. So we can, start to track some data on usage and figure out which applications are people using the most, how much time are they spending there. And to be honest, this is quite nascent for us as well. So we haven't really had a whole strategy around data-driven internal tooling, but it's a really cool thing that Retool allows you to do. And we definitely want to have most of our decisions as a business be taken and driven by data. And that includes the suite of internal tooling as well.
Awesome. Well, I'm sort of seeing this theme come up a little bit, which is this idea of upskilling using Retool. I know, Cornelius, your own story was as someone who started off primarily with a data background and is building these prod-ready apps. So how are you sort of empowering teammates at Fin with varying levels of technical competence, if you will, to sort of build apps, build Retool apps that the rest of the team can use? I know that you have a super smart and super curious team, but also I'm sure there's some best practices that you guys have in place to help people upskill. So would love to hear a little bit more about that.
Sure. So I think the first part, there are two elements to the answer of this question. One of which you already mentioned is just hiring. We just generally try to hire for smart and curious people who will have the drive to improve themselves. And I mean, that doesn't sound too cheesy here, but like borrowing a Steve Jobs quote, like it's a bicycle for the mind. Any kind of software you can build can make you more efficient and effective. And you don't have to, you don't have to have read 10 books on algorithms and data structures in Java to be able to build custom software nowadays and make your life and your job, your life more easy and the output more efficient of your job. So part of that is just, hiring people to, that have that drive and curiosity. And then the second part is giving them the opportunities and the tooling and the frameworks to really thrive in that curiosity. And the first element definitely is cultural, right? Like if everyone around you is building stuff and learning, make an Integromat and Retool and learning what an API call looks like, what is a JSON file, you kind of feel like a drive and a curiosity to do that as well. And what we've also started to do now is we have a whole internal academy for tooling. It started out with, automations. How do you, what is a JSON file? How do API calls work? How do you do something with something like Zapier or Make or Integromat? And we're doing the same for Retool. Like how does Retool work? What is a container? What is a table? And how do you build a query? And we basically have, for the people that get onboarded, we have a set of Confluence articles they can read and some videos and tutorials, and then they get a number of challenges that they can do, and they can follow up with people who are have more experience doing these kinds of things, and they'll get feedback on it. And yeah, I would say that's the more intentional part, but then there's also a huge sort of bottom-up cultural drive to empower this kind of product building everywhere.
And is every app that gets built part of this directory, or is there criteria that you have to meet?
That's a good question. So the idea that our current hypothesis, how we're going to use this directory, is that we will sort of treat it as the cool club of validated Retool applications. So everyone is still encouraged to build and model their own use cases. But then if you want to become part of this global directory, we'll use that as a sort of quality control gate, and we'll quickly check, hey, do you have a navigation bar? Do you have the feature request modal? And where should we slot it in the organization of this directory? And then use that sort of as a gateway to ensure that the platform aspect stays intact and doesn't get too dispersed.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, I don't want to take all of the time for my own questions, so let's hop quickly into the audience Q&A here. I'm seeing quite a few questions, so I will cherry pick a few based on sort of the ones that have the most upvotes and the ones that have common themes. And Julie, if you could respond to the rest in the chat, / if you would like to take them live, that's fine too, but we'll just try to get through what we have here from the audience. And for the audience members, please send in, in the last 15 minutes or so, any other questions that you have. We'd love to take them. So I'm seeing some questions around Git. How are you keeping a track of changes inside apps? Are you using Git? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Leander, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, of course, changes are a big thing. I think for every software engineer who knows it, conflicts are a big thing. If I am deleting something and another person is adding something, we have a conflict. Yeah, we are using actually this powerful tool in Retool called Git. So pretty much all our Retool apps are controlled by Git versioning, and we have the pretty much the same development cycle as you wish for microservices as for dashboards. So if you have a app and you want to do some changes, you first have to create a branch of the main or master. Then you do your changes, you commit them, and then we jump into our versioning control. In our case, it's GitLab. There you have like a list of your changes of your commit, create a merge request. You put some comments in your changes, what you did, and then you ask someone else to review it and hopefully get an approve without too much discussion.
And if I can just add something really quickly onto this, I think what's important to keep in mind is that we still allow people to build their own use cases without having to think about the overhead of using Git. Like if a customer support rep wants to build a bit like an application, we don't have them learn Git first. They can. That's a cool thing. That's very clever how Retool implemented this, that you can build apps and like have the instant changes and save. And at some point you can make it into a protected app, and then you have versioning and Git. And I think that's a really clever way to encourage people to build the things that they need to build. But then once something is in production and there's significant business value attached to it, you want to make sure that it doesn't get broken by one bad change and that you have some sort of traceability. And that's the point when we would convert it to a protected app and start using Git. And then if apps are being built by product managers and software engineers from the very beginning that are very comfortable with Git, they might just use the protected app feature from the start.
And sort of while we're discussing this permissioning and sort of ergonomics best practices in Retool, I see a question about when you create a new app, Retool immediately takes you to prod state. How do you go from staging to prod? And how often are you sort of going between the two?
So yeah, I would say like it depends on what kind of app it is. If it's a protected app from the beginning, then you have to do all of the development of the dev on the dev URL, so on the staging. And then what we will do for protected apps is you commit your changes, you work on them, and then we use the releases feature to release all of the changes, like a combined like stashed changes, if you will, in one release, in one go. But then for the ones that are just sort of being built and sort of in the iteration phase, I think they can be built from production. But then once you hit the making it a protected app, you have to start working on it for changes on dev. But maybe Leander, you have more details here.
Yeah, that's actually quite the case. So these pretty much production and staging rules only apply for protected apps, and the rest is pretty much on its own.
Makes sense. And sort of a lot of the applications are controlling these business critical functions, and multiple people are working on them. How do you manage data errors?
Leander, do you want to take that first, and I can add some details later?
So just to make clear around data errors. So pretty much what we are doing is we're building retooled apps on top of our APIs. So pretty much you can enforce, of course, business logic in Retool apps, and we're doing it, for example, in the KYC dashboard, where we have like certain conditions that only if they are fulfilled you can change data. But on the other side, what you can also do is you can enforce your logic on the backend. Of course, in Retool it's way faster. Yeah, actually, we're going quite well with the KYC dashboard with that.
Awesome. I see another technical question. Do you separate APIs that serve your customer-facing website and apps versus that serve your Retool apps, or are they sort of essentially the same API?
Yes, so good question. Actually, we have some customer-facing apps, of course, APIs, especially the customer portal. And yeah, first of all, these APIs are mostly protected due to cookies, so we can't access these APIs. So what we have our internal APIs that are managing all our data and all our resources, and then pretty much on top of that, we have a API that is managing the customer portal and everything customer facing, which is then talking to these backend services that manage our business logic. And Retool internally is then directly, of course, talking to these internal APIs.
Awesome. And there's a very specific question around your custom component, Leander. What are the two other libraries besides React Pan-Zoom that you were using?
Pardon? I didn't get it.
Remember the custom component that you showed us in the KYC app? Someone wants to know the exact two libraries that you were using besides React Pan-Zoom.
So yeah, we're using a minimum version of React and a minimum version of the React DOM. And yeah, actually, it's you can boil it down to I would guess like 15 lines of code. So it's pretty much just to have that to have that functionality in the script tag. Very lightweight.
You could probably also share the component, right?
Sure, yeah. Here, I hope you guys can see it. So take a screenshot fast. So yeah, as I said, in the script text, downloading pretty much our three packages: the React Pan-Zoom, production DOM, and the production React. And down here in the script text, this is pretty much this connection or API, how you would name it, which is allowing us to connect to the Retool app and to connect. Pretty much just call that function, connect the React component, and just throw it in.
Nice. I think that answers it. So thank you, Leander. I'm going to fire off two quick questions for Julie and then a final question for the Fin team here. So if you have others, you can email any of us. Specifically, Julie and I are just firstname@retool.com, and we're happy to take any additional questions you have. But Julie, how does Retool handle the protection of PPI?
Hi. So as I've answered in some of the questions and in the chat, Fin is currently hosted on premise, which means they're self-hosted, and all of their hosting is kind of done on, they're in our infrastructure. And the reason why we do that, and the reason why that's helpful for a lot of our enterprise customers, is because that means you have entire control over both your own secrets for any of your resource credentials, as well as how you would like to scale and deploy your instances. In terms of how Retool also supports PPI on our cloud offering, our SaaS offering, is we connect to all of your existing data sources. Retool is stateless. We don't store any of your PPI. We don't have access to any of it. So even if I wanted to, I wouldn't be able to see any of that data, which means you have total control over, again, how you connect to your data sources.
Awesome. I also see some questions on Redis. Do we have Redis use cases? I know we do. What are some common ones, Julie?
Yeah, absolutely. I also answered this question kind of partly in someone else's question about caching and Retool. So we definitely recommend caching as much as possible, both for cost and for performance and latency. So you want your apps to work well, and you also want them to be as cheap as possible. So we support native caching for our cloud and SaaS offering, but we also allow, if you are hosted on-premise or if you're self-hosted, for you to connect to a Redis resource to also support that cache. I'm actually not sure if Finn has any caching or if Finn has Redis set up.
I think we do cache, yeah.
So we don't do Redis caching, but yeah, as Cornelius said, we do cache, currently mainly client side, which is, it's stupidly easy and it's so powerful. It's just pretty much just tag a button, put your time to live, and you're done. And we have dashboards, of course, 47 queries, 5 data sources. We pull a lot of data, but if you cache, you can pretty much reduce the loading time from like 20 seconds down to 3 or 1. So powerful.
Yeah, the native offering is super easy. If you have built on Retool before, if you go into the advanced settings of a specific query in Retool, there's a literal toggle that's like, cache this query, and then you can cache it. And like Leander says, you can tell how long you want that cache to list for, and you can also invalidate the cache or clear the cache programmatically or dynamically. And so very easy to use in Retool, and would definitely recommend for performant apps.
Awesome, thank you. And the last question that we'll take today is, how do you deal with changes in your data model? How do you make sure to remember to update all of your affected components? I try to use Retool modules as much as possible and still happen to forget about updating components after making a backend change every now and then. Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to happen inevitably. I think that's just a part of life. I would say generally, if you do changes in your backend and the data model, and you have most of the core things being handled through the API, you can reduce the blast radius of an internal data model change by making sure the interfaces output the same, irrespective of what's happening in the databases. But yeah, I would say, like, if you use modules as much as possible for the core things, you will have to have a dedicated person who makes sure that the output remains the same, or at least the module is updated, and then all of the Retool applications that use it get that update as well. And then to be honest, like that's something that, if there's for some reason no data being shown on some application that we use because there was a change in the data model that we just missed to propagate to the front end, someone will hit the bug request and just let us know, and then we'll find out and we'll change it that way. So having a way to do frictionless feedback for the people who actually use those on a day-to-day basis helps a lot with at least fixing the issues quickly, and using as many APIs as possible and not exposing your data model also helps reduce the blast radius of data model changes.
I have to add one small thing, So what is also helping here is pretty much also the culture, how we're building Retool apps, due to the fact that pretty much everyone has somehow 1 or 2 apps. You're pretty much always like also using your apps or the apps of your team. So pretty much you have like the direct control. It's not like that there are 4 or 5 people at Finn in charge of all Retool dashboards. It's pretty much democratized.
Awesome. I think we got all of the questions here. If not, please feel free to email Julie or I. It's firstname@retool.com. Again, we're happy to take questions or happy to connect you with support. But that really wraps us up for today. A huge thank you to Cornelius and Leander for being a part of today's session, and to all the audience members for being so engaged and sending questions in that we could take. We'll share a recording of this event in the next few days, and so watch out for that email from us. And I hope you all enjoy your day, and thanks again for joining us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.